They called me the woman who limped. That's how they described me, with a whisper or a warning, depending on who is speaking. Some said I didn't belong out there. Others said I was the most unexpected threat they ever faced. They weren't entirely wrong. My name is Virginia Hall, and for a time, I worked behind enemy lines, with a typewriter, a walking cane, and a memory for details that could change lives. But I didn't start there. Before the world fell apart, I was just a girl with 2 passports, a love for languages, and a plan to become a diplomat. I studied hard, spoke French fluently, dreamed of posting after posting around the world. Then, a single accident changed the course of everything. It was just a hunting trip in Turkey. A slip, a misfire, and I lost my left leg below the knee. The prosthetic I received was heavy and awkward. I named it Cuthbert, mostly to make myself laugh. When I reapplied to the U.S. diplomatic service, they told me politely that my physical limitations made me unsuitable. Translation: you limp. We can't picture that in formal photos. But I wasn't finished. I took other jobs. I went where the world was moving Europe at the edge of something bigger than anyone could imagine. And when the borders began to shift, I stayed. Because I'd already learned what it was like to lose a part of yourself. I wasn't afraid to do it again. In 1941, I was recruited by a British agency that didn't technically exist. No uniform. No public name. Just a suitcase of forged documents and a new identity. Marie Monin, journalist from Vichy, France. My cover story? I was traveling across the countryside writing fluffy profiles on pastry chefs and cheese markets. What I was actually doing? Passing messages tucked into baguettes. Coordinating train slowdowns with railway workers. Helping downed pilots find their way back to safe hands. One of my first assignments nearly ended me. A local contact in the town of Chalons was arrested, and we feared he might break. Inside his coat was a notebook with names. Mine included. I had less than an hour to clear out. The nearest station was watched. Roadblocks were going up. So I borrowed a milk cart. Literally, a cart full of sloshing tin cans, pulled by an old mule named Mireille. I put on an apron, smeared my hands with flour, and limped into the countryside humming a lullaby I'd heard a child sing in town. 2 officers stopped me on the dirt road just past the orchard. One looked at my leg and raised an eyebrow. The other tapped the milk cans. "What's inside?" he asked. "Spilled dreams and spoiled cheese," I said in perfect regional slang, grimacing. He waved me on. I made it across the river and didn't stop moving until nightfall. Inside my jacket, I carried the last full map of the Lion Network, drawn in pencil on onion paper, folded into the lining of my sleeve. That night I slept in a shed beside goats. When I woke, my leg ached from the uneven terrain, and my heart was still pounding like I'd never escaped. But I had. And someone else would too, because of that map. I learned to carry information the way others carry faith. Not in my hands, but behind my eyes. In a bakery queue, I could recite code phrases under my breath. At a cafe, I'd fold sugar packets in certain patterns to signal safe contacts. My limp helped. People underestimated me. They noticed the cane, not the camera hidden in my handbag. The slow step, not the fast mind. Sometimes that was all I needed. I never wore a uniform. I didn't carry a weapon. But I carried people's names, and they trusted me with them. Once, I helped coordinate the relocation of 12 people in a single night, all of them in danger of arrest. We used bicycles, bakery carts, and a broken wine delivery truck. By dawn, all 12 were safe across the ridge. I never saw any of them again. Didn't need to. Their silence was the only thank you I wanted. But not everything went smoothly. Late one autumn, I heard my name, my real name, broadcast over shortwave radio. They'd discovered me. They described my face, my accent, my limp. And then they gave a warning. The woman is dangerous. If you find her, detain her immediately. It was no longer safe. Not for me. Not for anyone near me. The British offered an extraction. A plane. A rendezvous. But it would take too long. Instead, I made a choice. I would walk. Over the Pyrenees. On foot. In winter. With Cuthbert, the stubborn piece of metal strapped to my left leg. No one recommended it. I didn't ask for advice. I packed only what I could carry. Said goodbye to the girl who lent me her attic room. And disappeared into the snow. The Pyrenees don't negotiate. They either take you or they don't, and they never explain their reasons. My guide was an old man named Bastien. He knew every crease in those mountains the way I knew every nick in my prosthesis. We started at first light, when the snow was still quiet and honest underfoot. In my pockets, papers that said I was someone else. Beneath my coat, a wireless set, taken apart and hidden like pieces of a broken memory. The leg Cuthbert, as I called it when I needed to laugh at misfortune, behaved like a stubborn companion. Uphill it whispered slowly. Downhill it muttered carefully. The higher we climbed, the more I could hear the steady breath of Bastien ahead of me and the kind of silence that makes stones feel alive. He spoke little. 3 days, he said at the start. If the wind allows. The wind allowed and brought along rain, snow, and that damp that sinks straight into your bones, even into the ones you no longer have. We slept the first night in a shepherd's hut, no door, just a tilting board and blankets made of smoke and sheep's wool. I unstrapped Cuthbert the way I'd disassemble a transmitter, slowly, carefully, naming each pain so it would behave. Under the leather were the usual complaints: rubs, swelling, training aches. That was the price of moving forward. You're sure? Bastien asked without looking up. I'm too far in to be unsure, I said. Day 2 tasted of wind. Paths thinned, sky lowered. I counted steps to keep fear in a reasonable meter. 200, rest. 200, water. 200, you're fine. The things chasing me weren't men. They were time and accident. Men can be fooled. Time cannot. Accident prefers the company of the doubtful. So I repeated my small certainties: how the knee strap sits, how to place weight on fractured rock, how to catch balance when Cuthbert gives that extra half-step downhill. At dusk we dropped into a ravine. Bastien pointed at a cloud draped like a blanket between the ridges. Tomorrow she'll go lower, he said. We'll go higher. Good, I answered, meaning only not yet bad. The third day is always the longest, even when it isn't. Snow arrived not from the sky, but from the air itself, from your breath. I leaned into my stick, pressed the coat tight, and felt a laugh arrive silent, just the shape of it. Sometimes that's all that keeps you from shouting. At the saddle we stopped. From here, you alone, Bastien said. I go back. I handed him a small parcel, bread, and a slab of chocolate that had felt like vanity all the way up. For your road, I said. He didn't take it. For yours. And he left the way he had come without extra words. I took the last steps as if I were crossing into a different room of my life. On the Spanish side, I met what people with my kind of papers usually meet: doubt. The detention was procedural but not colorless. They examined my documents, weighed every scar and every pause in a sentence. I answered simple questions I had learned the way you learn multiplication tables. After the third round, I asked for water and a towel. When you're exhausted, neatness is a weapon. A clean face tells the truth better than the best alibi. Within a day, I was moved to another town. Within 2, I sat in a small room at a consulate under the heavy hush of diplomatic telephone lines. They offered tea. I asked for coffee. It was awful and perfect because it said the only thing that mattered. You are still here, Miss Hall, no matter the recipe. When the message finally arrived that complications were resolved, I felt no triumph, only that familiar tiredness that makes room for a new thought. What now? What now meant England. Coming back is like stepping from a dark room into a bright one. You suddenly notice the dust, and you avoid direct eyes. London greeted me with discipline rather than warmth. Some said my field work was over. I'd been identified. Time to write reports, train recruits, take care of yourself. I feel safest when I'm working, I said, and smiled. After brief wrangling, a different path appeared. New cover, new name, a change of outline. Wars are fought with nerve and with silhouettes. What you look like while doing things matters. No more journalist. I was to be a provincial farm woman, hands that remember milk, a back that knows baskets. I practiced walking half-stooped, shifted the color of my laughter, added a beat of thought before each word as if I were choosing from a shop where language is sold by weight. We didn't hide Cuthbert now, we emphasized him. People doubt less when you appear ordinary. They issued a new set. I called the receiver Horace, after the kind of man who waits longer than others and never complains. The return to France was a quiet one. I climbed down from a truck with other women in headscarves and cheap shoes, eyes fixed politely on the ground. In my pocket were short phrases to swap like passwords to our own memories. The first town smelled of soap, coal, and small hopes. A new contact waited, an elderly pharmacist who made cough tonic better than any doctor I knew. He showed me a cupboard behind the shop where I could assemble Horace and send a first hello. When the ether warmed soft, as if cats lived inside the wires, I realized how I'd missed the sound. Some people miss voices. I miss the hush between tones. I tapped out, on station. Cover holds. 3 addresses in hand. Request guidance for routes and timing. The reply was curt, which is the most comforting kind. Received. Proceed. This round of work was shadow to my earlier silhouette, less moving, more weaving. I met people on market squares, beside cowsheds, in doorways where high boots left tidy rectangles in the mud. I listened not only to words but to quiet. An apple set stem down meant not today. A potato seller shifting one crate twice meant eyes are near. A network is not cards on a table. It is a shared breath. You hear where the rhythm stumbles and raise a hand slower, faster until a window opens. One task was the sort that makes sensible people shake their heads. A major rail junction ran like a pulse through the region. If it could be made to stall for one night, the larger machine would hiccup. Getting near it unseen was the problem. The solution was simple and boring, the safest kind. They knew me as the milkwoman. I arrived with milk, as always, only this time with a kit of small, lawful inconveniences, tiny delays in the right places, innocent misplacements of paperwork, a lever that sticks at the exact wrong second. Not drama from novels. Just a nudge here and offbeat there, the kind of background stumbles no one notices until they add up at once. I recruited 3 helpers, a trackman with good hands, a warehouse clerk who could misfile with precision, and a woman in inventory who knew, better than her boss, where everything lived. Our windows were dawn and dusk. I chose dusk. Men look homeward at dusk and impatient eyes miss small things. We came as we always did. I carried tin churns. The worker's wife had a bundle of laundry. A boy trailed us with a fishing rod so preciously held it became more important than we were. Then we danced a choreography of precise mistakes. A knob turned not quite enough. A block just off its mark. A paper slipped into the wrong folder. And Horace waiting back at the pharmacist's, eager to be told done. After dark, I returned with hands that smelled of milk and iron. The air felt like that odd moment when your act has already left you and become its own creature. I fitted the set together, put on the headphones, and let the ether settle around me. Sending, I tapped. Point slowed. Expected effect, overnight delay. No sign of exposure. The reply didn't come right away. I sat in the dark, feeling every groove in the wooden table, every seam in Cuthbert's strap. Received. Excellent. Hold rhythm. Avoid unnecessary risk. Unnecessary risk is excellent advice. The trouble is, unnecessary is elastic. A week later came the warning I both expected and dreaded. New faces making too many inquiries. 2 strangers who vanished from the market. The alley by the pharmacy suddenly too quiet. Message relayed. Attention on you. Perhaps the leg. Perhaps a shadow. I changed routes. Changed my laugh. Even changed the tempo of the limp, slower now, homey, so that everyone saw the flaw and missed what I carried in my hands. One afternoon, sending a short note about a column that had left the highway for a farm road, the back door creaked. In the frame stood a man with careful hair and a gaze that liked to put periods where questions should be. "Do you work here?" he asked, without greeting. "I fetch cough syrup," I said, holding a bottle the pharmacist's wife had just filled. He looked a long time as if he waited for me to slip on silence. I met his stare calmly and listened for his breath to change, that moment when suspicion becomes a decision. "You limp," he said finally, a small triumph in the phrasing. "Since birth," I answered. "Rain enjoys reminding me." A customer coughed in the shop. The pharmacist's wife tapped her pestle 3 times, our signal, danger near, not inside. "Your papers," he said. I gave them over. They were perfect. Perfection is sometimes more alarming than a flaw. He leafed, returned, stepped aside to let me pass. "Take care," he said. Road slick. Outside, my fingers shook, not from fear but from standing still too long. When you remain in danger beyond a certain beat, your body tries to run even if you're not built for running. That evening I sent nothing. The next night, nothing again. Sometimes the best message is the pause. Let hunters chase prints that aren't there. But the war doesn't care for pauses. 2 days on, orders. Guide a small group past the outskirts to a contact point beyond town. 2 men and a young woman, her dress hem hiding a strip of paper stitched with names. The route was simple only on maps. In life it was windows that slam at the wrong moment, dogs with opinions, and lamps that hold interrogations of their own. We set out at dusk. I walked first with a basket of eggs, a perfect disguise. People rarely fear the person carrying what breaks. At a corner we were stopped. The questions were standard. Where to? From where? Why so late? I said, milk for a baby, invented a neighbor's name, and showed how eggs tremble when someone raises a voice. We were waved through, not because they believed me, but because boredom is merciful. The shed beyond town held what we needed: bicycles and 2 jackets, but also something else, a shadow in the doorway. I didn't see it. I felt it: tiredness, tobacco, a hand resting where questions live. "Back," I whispered. "New plan." We slid around the shed through thorn that wanted my coat more than I did. I led them in a path that made no sense, the kind only used by people who know they are watched. In the second field I threw 2 eggs as far as I could. They burst with a loud, ridiculous slap. A dog, somewhere out there, took offense, and the shadow went to investigate. We went the other way. At the break in the hedgerow, the young woman looked at me. "Do you always improvise like this?" "Only when there's no time to prepare," I said. We delivered them and returned separately. I came back alone with an empty basket, watching my feet so I wouldn't step on my own confidence. At the shop door, the pharmacist's wife met me. "A message for you," she said. They said it worked. I nodded and, for the first time that day, allowed myself to sit. That night I sent, "Route held. Party across. Station under watch. Rotation likely. Answer, received. Prepare to shift area. Instructions at dawn." A shift means my name, whatever name I'm using, has begun to acquire unhelpful weight nearby. Disappear before the search becomes personal. I packed Horace into a flower box and touched Cuthbert's strap, a small ritual to remind myself that motion is a choice. Tomorrow, I told the empty room. New street, new market, new laugh. I slept to rain drumming on tin like the soft hiss of the ether. I dreamed not of mountains or queues or bright rooms with too much light, but of an apple set stem down, the sign that says today be silent. That is the work, the art of reading a world made of small signals while everyone else waits for capital letters. The next morning I changed everything I could without betraying myself. City, shop, the place where useful papers conveniently go missing, and the route that makes tea go cold exactly where it should. Most important, I changed roles. No longer the milkwoman, I was now a farmhand looking for work. With that role, I was taken on for a week at a place on the edge of town, long enough to watch the flow of traffic, short enough to leave before my face had a name. There, I witnessed the scene that explains why uniforms underestimated me for so long. Early evening, yard, me with a pail in hand. A car rolled up, 2 men stepped out. "You've hired someone new?" they asked the owner. He nodded at me. "The one who limps." One officer didn't even bother to approach, took a glance from a distance and turned away. I sent a polite thank you to Cuthbert. Sometimes your weakness is the perfect disguise. They spoke to the owner about feed, wood, and other polite cloths thrown over important furniture. I counted, not steps this time, but seconds between their phrases. A pause before train, just a shade too long. Care around the word tomorrow. A dull wait in night. That's what information looks like when it still wears a mask. At midnight, I stepped into a new cupboard behind a grain shop and tapped, "Observation, probable night movement of loads across fields from the mill road. Requesting guidance." The reply, confirmed by independent source. Prepare diversion. Only slowing, no bold action. Priority, network safety. Slowing is my favorite tactic. It doesn't make headlines. It makes schedules unravel. I did what I do best, asked ordinary people, not heroes, the mill watchman who prefers tea and stories, a boy who runs beside wagons, a woman who knows the difference between today's noise and yesterday's. Together we moved the rhythm, just a little. Enough. When it was over, I indulged myself by sleeping without the set at my side. I woke to a window rattling in the wind and thought, I'm still here. It may be the most important sentence in my profession. By afternoon, a new instruction, preparing a wider action. Need 3 signal points. Caution, possible leakage. 3 points are 3 vulnerabilities. I chose them by physics, not romance, where sound bounces just right, where a normal street lamp hides our odd one, where the dog barks at the moon instead of people and thus becomes an ally. When I sent the coordinates, I added the line that always amused the operator across the water, and send regards to Cuthbert. He's well behaved today. Back came, regards delivered. Continue to be invisible. Invisibility isn't absence. It's being exactly where no one is looking. If anything saved me then and later, it was that I limped just enough to be noticed and then dismissed. Ahead lies the night when 3 lights answered at once and a town held its breath, not knowing why. Ahead is a meeting with people whose names I won't say, though their hands remember mine. Ahead is the moment everything nearly failed because of one small thing I didn't foresee, and the conversation that kept me in the work when everyone sensible advised I leave it. But that is for another part of the story. For now, it's enough that I once again walked where I wasn't expected and left behind only the smell of milk and apples. And that, despite all advice, I took no unnecessary risks. Only the necessary ones.